Happy holidays again, everyone, and today is actually quite appropriate. Today is Kyo Kusanagi's birthday, December 12th, and today we'll be doing an overview of King of Fighters 1996 for, of course, the Neo Geo. So please watch, like, comment, and subscribe. Now, this is definitely one of my favorite King of Fighters games for purely selfish reasons. The 1996 version basically commemorates the year that I graduated high school. So for me, the 1996 moniker is near and dear and special to my heart. Fortunately, it also coincides with a wonderful playing game with an amazing soundtrack. Both the arcade and even the arranged soundtracks online that's available, definitely a joy to behold and to listen to. With King of Fighters 1996, SNK again shows the mastery in regards to what they're able to do year after year. For the series, this game, of course, is the second in the Orochi saga, culminating in the upcoming 1997 King of Fighters, which I'll be reviewing for or doing an overview of next weekend. When 1996 came out, it made a pretty big impact, especially to the series itself. There's definitely some changes made to both the gameplay. A lot of the characters have been redrawn and reanimated, as you can see from the ground up. There's a lot of different animations. There's a lot more nuances to the characters themselves. There's also new playable characters as well that have been added to the roster compared to what was just initially added in King of Fighters 95. In King of Fighters 96, of course, is the first time you get to see Leona, who replaced Hyder as part of the Kyrie Team. She is pretty strong, and I would say a lot of people would say a little OP'd here. She does get kind of a debuff later on in the series. There's also the boss team, which is also one of my favorite teams, not always to fight against. So that boss team does consist of Geese Howard from Fatal Fury, Wolfgang Krauser, also from Fatal Fury, and Mr. Big from Art of Fighting. Kasumi Todo also joins from the Art of Fighting as part of the women's team. There's also four new characters that join this game. Two of the bosses, Gonitz and Chizuru Kaguya, as well as also Yori's teammates, Vice and Mature. The first time seeing them. First two of the bosses as far as Gonitz and Chizuru is pretty typical of SNK bosses, pretty aggravating and annoying to fight against. Nothing new there. And with the Yori's team, of course, with Vice and Mature, both are pretty popular. Both characters play extremely well and do quite a bit of damage. And since they don't control like any other fighters, unless you're really used to them, really kind of countering and getting used to their move sets can be a bit daunting at first. And part of the gameplay changes made in King of Fighters 96 is the replacement of the Sidestep that was originally in both 94 and 95. This time around, there is an evasive roll, which you can do both forwards or backwards in this game. It does change the pacing of the game itself. There's definitely some forethought of kind of planning and some mind games of whether or not that roll, whether forward or backwards, really does benefit you in the long run, especially if your opponent is able to kind of guess where you'll end up being and punish you for it. A good example of punishing someone on maybe a backwards roll is basically dependent on, of course, a desperation, a super move, but you could time it just so that when they're about to get out of the frame animation of finishing from that roll, you could be hitting them with a desperation or a super move. And also one of the additions that I did like in King of Fighters 96 is the actual run move. So if you, in the original games 94 and 95, double tapping forward does a kind of a short hop jump. Where in 96, it's actually a full out run, which does change some of the attack options you could do, especially with the Art of Fighting team. You can, of course, run and then finish that motion with a Dragon Punch to do, of course, if you're Rio or Garcia, to be able to actually do the Dragon Punch. I was having a little bit of difficulty pulling it off in the video, but it is definitely a viable move. With the additions of both the evasive roll, either forward or backward, or to run, definitely changes the dynamic of the game and the pacing of the game. It definitely, gives it a more aggressive, more kind of an offensive feel to the games, especially comparing to 94 and 95. And as you can see, the graphics, I mean, honestly, the first time I saw 96, again, and I could be speaking due to a slight bias for the King of Fighters 96 game, just love the backgrounds, love the redrawn sprites and animation, love all the little kind of extra little incidental graphical touches that they have. Uh, Again, a lot of the changes here that mostly 94, 95 had a lot of clones and a lot of the move sets were kind of similar. This time around, they did differentiate in King of Fighters 96, where some of the characters actually have some different moves and abilities that they didn't have in 94 and 95. Overall, there's about 27 playable characters, which at that time was quite a big jump. Of course, a lot of this was changed with basically some changes to damage levels. Um, if you do connect, especially with good combo, you can definitely smack someone around. It definitely does. The matches themselves could be over before you know it with a wrong or ill-timed move. And there's also some changes here to the characters where not everybody has a similar projectile. Some projectiles in the old games, instead of going full screen, are just kind of I don't want to say area of effect, but only good for maybe 2 to 3 feet in front of them versus full screen. There's also quite a, with that, also there's also the timing of basically whiffing is definitely a bit more damaging here. So you definitely want to think about what you're going to do next, especially if you're going to try to spam like a fireball or some type of projectile attack. And also in this game, counter moves are actually something that's in place where if you were to counter a special move, you can actually continue that combo and counter back with a counter combo, which again, great to make it a bit more of an aggressive, faster paced feel than just turtling like in the original 94 and 95. You can also cancel special moves as well by hitting all four buttons and even calling out one of your teammates to help either evade certain attacks or come in to help you while you're dazed or just needing a bit of a breather. And King of Fighters 96, at least to my memory, is one of the few games where there were actually some special introductions, especially if you run across certain characters, like for example, if Kyo were to face Yuri, things like that, which they built upon in later series. Nice little kind of a wink or a nod to fans of the series, especially the different backstories. And also, as I mentioned, King of Fighters 96 is one of the first games where really the soundtrack stood out. It's almost harder to find a soundtrack or a boss background music that sucks in 96 than in 94 or 95. A lot of the iconic songs that basically are tied to each character continue onwards for later in the series, like Kyo and Yori's team. So even King SNK actually acknowledged the prowess for the music by even releasing soundtracks specifically for these games. Of course, this game came out in 1996, and not just to the MVS, AES systems. It also even came out to the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Unfortunately, the PlayStation version is probably one of the worst ones just due to the lack of video RAM and also the speed of CD-ROM drive. While the Neo Geo CD single speed or double speed CD-ROM drive was slow, once it was actually in memory, the frames of animation for each character were intact. The same could not be said for the PlayStation. The Saturn with more video RAM fared a little bit better in this regard. 1996, you've got the Japan team or the Hero team starring Kyo Kusanagi, Benimaru Nikaido, Goro Daimon. Next, you've got the Fatal Fury team with Terry and Andy Bogard and Joe Higashi. Art of Fighting team returns with Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and Yuri Sakazaki. The Kyrie Warriors team, as I mentioned earlier, stars Leona Heidern instead of Heidern, Ralph Jones, and Clark Still. For the Psychic Soldier team, you've got Aten Asimiya, Sei Konsu, and Shin Gensai. For the Korea team, you've got Kim Kapwan, Chang Kohan, and Choi Bonji. For women's fighting team, you've got Kasumi Toto from Art of Fighting, who's actually a new character for the King of Fighters series, Mai Shiranui, and King, also from Art of Fighting. For the Yagami team, which is also considered the rivals team, you've got Yori Yagami, Mature, who's a new character, and Vice, who is a new character as well. For the bosses team, you've got Geese Howard, Wolfgang Krauser, and Mr. Big, who are brand new to the King of Fighters series. The mid boss is Chizaru Kagura, who is a new character for the series, and also Leopold Gonitz, who also is a new character as well. Overall, it was released on the arcades in July of 1996, then came home in September of 1996 for the Neo Geo AES, then the Neo Geo CD in October of 96, the Sega Saturn in December 31st of 1996, then of course came in PlayStation, first in July of 1997 in Japan, and it was then re-released in July of 1998, and even came out to the Game Boy in August of 1997 in Japan and in the Europe at 1998. This is still available. You can pick it up easily on the PSN network, the Xbox store. You can play the version on ACA, as well on the Nintendo Switch, which is great for fighting on the go for a nice, wonderful price of $7.99 regular. And you can find it sometimes for sale for about $3.99. And as much as I profess my own personal bias for this as one of my favorite King of Fighter 96 game, again, only because of the moniker, the soundtrack, the redrawn graphics, by no means do I consider this one the better balanced King of Fighters games. That is definitely not so. Towards that end, if I had to pick only one King of Fighters game, it would have to be a tie between King of Fighters 1998 or King of Fighters 2002 Ultimate Match, both for different reasons. If I had to choose from the original saga, I would definitely say The Dream Match Never Ends 1998 for me. If I had to choose just character size and the variety of characters, I probably would go with King of Fighters 2002 Ultimate Match for a better balance, variety of gameplay, etc. Part of the other gameplay features that they did add was also enhancing a max mode. So if your bar is full and you press A, B, and C, you can definitely, of course, charge your max, and then once it reaches full capacity, you enter a max mode for a pretty short time. You get basically an extra damage bonus. I believe it's in between like 20, maybe 25 or 30% increase. There's a little bit more pushback for all hits, increased hit stuns, things like that. You can also even do a guard cancel roll as well. The deadly moves returns, and of course your super deadly moves. So doing your desperation attacks while you're in max mode enhances the combo and power of that deadly move as well. There's also guard cancel rolls which you can do, which also is called the emergency roll by pressing A and B and while guarding. It's also a great roll for a move for punishing certain block strings as well. Because dodging is still the same, B, C, and D. Taunting is by pressing B and C as well. And then bringing back again to those redrawn graphics, sprites, and animation, 96 was basically the forerunner of all the redrawn sprites and graphics that would be built upon in later series. 97, 98, King of Fighters 99, and then once it hits 2000, that was unfortunately the time when SNK was on the decline, and unfortunately they reused a lot more of their sprites. Same token, Capcom did that as well, so it was really unfortunately I don't want to say the death knell of fighting games in the 2000s, but there was definitely a huge drop in decline, especially as more 3D based games, whether that be a shooter, whether that be a first person shooter, an action game, or arcade platformer, things like that became a lot more prevalent. And in summation, really, I know this has been a bit longer, one of my longer overviews. Again, just because this game just has a special place in my heart, it is still one of my favorite games. Again, graphics easily still, for me, a 10 out of 10. Sound, again, still a 10 out of 10. The quality of the soundtrack, the voice effects, nary a scratch in any of the sound bites. Gameplay wise, not counting balancing, mind you, as far as variety, as far as options, definitely for me, 9 out of 10. Now, if we're talking balance as part of the gameplay, then I would have to knock it down to like a 7 or a 7.5. Just because, again, this is definitely not one of the more balanced games in the King of Fighters series, but then that said, it is still one of the most fun games I've had, going up to at least King of Fighters 13, and of course, not counting the dream matches like 1998 or 2002. Now, if you are going to pick up this title, I do recommend it more for the Nintendo Switch, just because then you'll be able to play it on the go, play it anywhere you're at, and if you're on the Switch versus the Switch Lite, it's a quick, easy dock, or just put it on tablet or tabletop mode and hook up some Bluetooth joysticks to it, or gamepads to it. So that way, quick, fun, and play anywhere you go. Barring, of course, you can still, of course, pick it up for PC as well. If you had lucked out, or at least keep track of Twitch Gaming from Amazon, they had actually given out a lot of the King of Fighters ACA Neo Geo games for free as part of their Prime Gaming. Also, it often goes on sale on Good Old Games, or GOG.com. So if you have that on PC, a lot of the times the Neo Geo games pretty often go on sale at least once a quarter, where you can pick up a game for about $3. You can't pick it up on the PlayStation Network. You can pick it up on Xbox. Definitely when they go on sale as well. There were even, of course, physical versions from limited run games, where you can pick up the King of Fighters Orochi Saga, which consists of 95, 96, and 97. Unfortunately, I believe that's sold out now, especially if you picked up the classic version. I, of course, picked that classic version up on limited run games, and also picked up the vinyl soundtrack signed by the composer, because I love these soundtracks. The SNK games have always had amazing soundtracks. 96, definitely one of the top ones in my memory. You can, of course, pick it up, and I'm kind of fingers crossed. I'm hoping it does come up to the IR Arcade. I'm hoping it does get released there, only because IR Arcade have announced that next year all of their games that's purchasable on their store will have online play. So to be able to have this and play online is amazing. Hopefully, if the netcode holds up to snuff, that is, I think, the only way legally that you can play the games online. Even with the Switch, Xbox, or PlayStation, you really can't play the online version of this game. That said, there are games like King of Fighters 1998, where they did release a online version both on Steam, PlayStation Store, and on Xbox. Of course, King of Fighters 2002 Ultimate Match also got rollback netcode as well, so you can pick those up and play online. If you are going to collect it for the AES system, I completely recommend looking and buying the Japanese versions. Only because they're a lot more wallet friendly. While they're not cheap, they're almost the cost of a system, a current console. But at least more often than not, if you are buying from Japan, a lot of the collectors there really, I don't want to say babied, but definitely took care of their stuff. When I had this on AES, I literally picked it up for about $100. Again, this was years ago. I doubt I can get that now, and it was complete in box. Manual was still in the baggie. There was nary any discoloration, any bent pages on the manual. Nowadays, it might be a little tougher to find it at that small of a price. My guess is anywhere from about 200 to 400. The prices have really jumped for retro gaming in the past few years, but the Japanese version is still light years cheaper than trying to find a limited American copy. Plus, I just love the Japanese snap cases. So that was also one of the reasons why I like collecting from there. It does take a little bit longer if you buy it from Japan, just due to the pandemic and the shipping delays and everything. But otherwise, also recommend that. But if you're looking to really check out a series, again, King of Fighters 94, and hopefully all the way to 15. By all, from what I've seen so far, King of Fighters 15 looks like an amazing game, and I can't wait to have my physical copy arrive. I actually ordered it for both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X for King of Fighters 15 from Pix and Love over in France, because they actually released a physical copy with the Neo Geo snap case, soundtrack, art cards, the full Monty, and there was of course limited number as well. So it was pretty hard to resist. All right, and as much as I would love to wax poetic and could go on more and more with this game, I know I've got to cut it short and come to a close. Next weekend, we'll be recording and developing out King of Fighters 1997 video overview for everyone. That would be the last of the Orochi saga before the King of Fighters 98 Dream Match. And again, we are on the road to King of Fighters 15, which comes out in February. So everyone, I do want to thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It definitely helps with getting the views and, of course, increasing the channel. Great to kind of go back and take a look at these games that not only had a huge place in my heart from my adolescent years, high school years, going onwards to my adult years, but it's just nice to see where we came from gaming-wise to where we are now. And the amazing part is, even playing this today, it still holds up. So it's definitely not one of those games where it only looks and plays well in your memory because of rose-tinted glasses. It really is because it still is a work of art, both in sound, graphics, and of course, the amazingly fun gameplay, which is one of the main reasons why these games are just classic. Alright everyone, happy holidays, and see you next weekend.